Hey, folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. It is Wednesday afternoon, March 20th. March Madness is upon us, one of my favorite times of the year, the college basketball tournament here in the United States. We've also got March Madness of a different variety unfolding not only in the Middle East, but right at my doorstep. I'm in the United States, in Canada, where Canada just announced that it is abandoning arms sales to Israel. Folks, this can only be called a betrayal of the world's one and only Jewish state on behalf of the government of Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister. It's outrageous and then some. We've got all the details on that. You see the title of this newscast, Canada Abandons Israel? Question mark. Hey, the only reason the question mark's in there, we know the Canadian people, a great amount of the Canadian people, love and support Israel, just as the people of South Africa do. Last week, we covered how the foreign minister of South Africa is threatening to arrest any IDF soldiers who enter that country. Well, I got a lot of feedback from viewers who live in South Africa who said, hey, Erick, wait a minute. That's the government. That's not us. South Africa stands with Israel. I'd wager to say that it's the same situation in Canada where many Canadians support Israel, but it's their government that is taking some very dangerous steps right now against Israel. Although I have to say, anti-Semitism right now in Canada is exploding as well. But nonetheless, banning all arms sales to Israel at a time when Israel is really in its most precarious position since the miraculous rebirth of Israel in 1948. This is a time when Israel needs support, needs arms, needs all the help it can get as it wages war on multiple fronts, and Canada picks this very moment to pull the rug out from under Israel. And by the way, Justin Trudeau just met with Israeli War Cabinet member Benny Gantz yesterday as well, and then comes this announcement. So betrayal is the word I would use, but we're going to break it down more. Also, Benjamin Netanyahu, speaking of the West and troubles and problematic positions and stances by Western governments against Israel, the Biden administration clearly at the top of that list in the direction they're going in. But Benjamin Netanyahu may very well soon, folks, address the U.S. Congress. Now, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who's a Republican, announced this today that the invite has been extended to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to address the U.S. Congress soon, Johnson hopes. Now, Bibi, on at least two occasions before, maybe three, definitely two, because I was at one of them, addressed Congress. And I believe it was the 2015 speech, which focused on the Iran deal and the dangers of it, where Bibi implored the U.S. Congress against the Iran deal. I was at that speech, and folks, it was memorable to say the least. He's obviously a rousing, incredible speaker and communicator, is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So will he come once again and make the case before the U.S. Congress at a time, again, when the leadership here in D.C., the Biden administration, so-called leadership, they're not showing very much of it on the international stage, is turning more and more publicly against Israel. Folks, just think of the speech by Chuck Schumer last week, the Senate Majority Leader. You might say, well, he's not a member of the Biden administration. No, but he's the most powerful member of the Senate Majority Leader, and he is essentially a proxy for the Biden administration. He goes out there on the Senate floor and calls for new elections in Israel and essentially for Benjamin Netanyahu to be deposed, and points the finger at Israel as one of the problems in the region. You know, Israel's a sovereign nation the last time I checked. And I don't see Israelis dictating to the United States, and say at a time during a tumultuous U.S. presidential election, whether it's 2000 with the hanging Chads and George W. Bush, Al Gore, whether it's 2020, Biden, Trump. I don't see Israeli leaders or politicians weighing in and lecturing the United States and telling us what we should do. And even worse, lecturing the people of the United States. Look, that's what Schumer did, right? He's calling on Israelis to call for new elections. I don't see Israel wading into the U.S. internal political scene in the way Chuck Schumer just did. I'm using this word, folks, without hesitation. It was disgraceful. as was this move by Canada, but we'll talk more about it in a minute. I want to start with a poll, which I believe is very eye-opening. I'd say it's troubling, and it is, but it's not surprising. This is the Times of Israel reporting. I'm looking down. I'm just reading this off my phone. I do not want to misquote. And by the way, welcome everyone joining us. Hey, from around the world. I know we have many Canadian viewers, and they will weigh in on this. What do you think, to all of our viewers in Canada, about this decision by the Canadian government to ban all exports, all arms exports to Israel? Seems like a pretty serious and grave move by the government of Justin Trudeau, who, by the way, has really engaged, I don't want to call it anti-Israel rhetoric in the past few months since October 7th, but has essentially, read between the lines when he speaks, said that Israel is not observing humanitarian law and is targeting civilians. It's not, it's not, he didn't say those words, but it was a hop, skip, and a jump to those words, what he's saying. This has to stop. Women and children are being killed. That was just a month after October 7th, mid-November. Trudeau's already saying that. The Biden administration at least waited a few months before it started piling on Israel. Trudeau didn't wait very long. It was a few weeks after October 7th. But here's the poll. Brace yourself, over 70% of Palestinians still maintain that Hamas was, quote, correct to commit the October 7th atrocities. You know, we hear so much from the likes of the Biden administration, Justin Trudeau, Western diplomats, Western governments, about the plight of innocent Palestinian civilians. So I find this poll very interesting. When I hear these numbers, a new poll released by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research. Okay, you might say, on one hand, it's good. Listen to this. The poll finds declining levels of support for Hamas in both Gaza and the West Bank. Great. Although the percentage who believe, again, that Hamas's October 7th onslaught was correct is virtually unchanged. According to the survey, 71% of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank backed the October 7th massacres, in which 1,200 people were killed, 253 more kidnapped. It's only dropped 1 percentage point since December, when 72% said they supported October 7th. Wow, what progress. 71% of Palestinians now say they supported October 7th. Support for the atrocities increased in Gaza, and it dipped a bit in the West Bank, but still 71%, folks. Respondents to this poll, Palestinians again, Palestinian civilians presumably, also gave high marks to the Hamas leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, over his conduct in the war, with 61% approving, and that's down a few percentage points from December, but still 61% of Palestinians polled say, yeah, Sinwar, his conduct in the war, they support it. I'm sorry. The only conduct I've seen by Yahya Sinwar in the war is hiding in tunnels beneath Gaza while civilians are exposed on top. Call me crazy, but that's all I've seen from Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza, during this conflict. Some closing thoughts here on the poll. Among the other questions in the survey, who would Palestinians vote for if new parliamentary elections were held today? This is revealing. A plurality of Palestinians polled, 30% say they would vote for Hamas. Hamas was the leading vote getter. 14% for Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah movement. So 30%, a plurality polled, say, you know what? We'd vote for Hamas. In the wake of everything they've seen on October 7th, since October 7th, and especially in Gaza. Look, the human suffering there since October 7th, after Hamas invaded, yes, Hamas launched a war against Israel. It wasn't the other way around. Israel was the victim here. Hamas launched an invasion unannounced on October 7th, again, massacring 1,200 people, men, women, children, the elderly, Holocaust survivors. carting off over 230 more into captivity in Gaza. That was all Hamas is doing. And now Israel responds to make sure that something like October 7th never happens again. And that requires, ladies and gentlemen, crushing Hamas decisively. Israel does that, and many Palestinians have suffered. It's war. It's terrible. There are civilian casualties in war. It's horrible, although Israel goes to extraordinary lengths to avoid any civilian casualties. And although Hamas willfully and intentionally uses civilians as human shields, all of that, it's suffering, folks. It's war. You would think that the people of Gaza may have an epiphany, a great awakening, and say, oh my, Hamas brought this on us. If Hamas never invaded Israel, none of this would have happened. The suffering we're undergoing right now. This was Hamas. And Hamas continues to compound our suffering by intentionally positioning rocket launchers and other forms of war and weaponry in civilian areas, hospitals, playgrounds, schools. The IDF has uncovered it all, folks, since invading Gaza in response to the Hamas invasion of southern Israel. For example, to give you an idea, Shifa Hospital, Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City, big operation there, obviously, back in November, undertaken by Israel, November, December. It was a Hamas terror compound underneath the biggest hospital in Gaza. Tunnels, the whole 9 yards. Well, Israel cleared out that hospital a few months ago. Wouldn't you know that Hamas and Islamic Jihad, the other Iranian terror proxy operating in Gaza, returned to Shifa Hospital, to the point where over the past few days, Israel has had a major operation ongoing there where some 300 Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists have been arrested and others killed in firefights with the IDF. And guess what else the IDF uncovered? Now, this gives you an idea of what a possessed, obsessed, and possessed demonic death cult Hamas is. Would you believe that they tried to redig the tunnels and rebuild the tunnels under the Shifa hospital that Israel, the IDF, destroyed so they were no longer operational? Hamas is already back at it, rebuilding the tunnels underneath the Shifa hospital, or at least they were until the IDF uncovered this dastardly plot. What does this tell you, ladies and gentlemen? Number one, it tells you you're dealing with people who are a demonic death cult whose sole purpose for existence is to kill, murder, and maim, and in particular, kill Jews. The Gaza is in complete chaos, much of it's rubble. And what is Hamas, the governing force in Gaza, concerned with? Redigging those terror tunnels. Not the people, redigging. I mean, the amount of evil, the level of evil there. This is one of the most evil forces walking this earth today. I'm talking about Hamas, which brings me to my second point. This should be a wake-up call for everyone who's telling Israel, don't go into Rafah, don't finish the job, agree to an immediate ceasefire that would leave Hamas alive to fight another day. There you go. Israel took control of Shifa Hospital, or so they thought. They left. Hamas came back, not only came back in force in that hospital, but began restarting the terror tunnel apparatus. Folks, this would happen writ large, not just at Shifa Hospital, if Israel were to not finish the job. You know it, and I know it. If we're being intellectually honest here and using a shred of common sense, and if you have any shred of knowledge of recent history, how many operations did Israel undertake in Gaza over the past, let's see, since like 2008? About 16 years. 5 before October 7th. Fairly major operations where the fighting lasted for weeks in some cases. Israel hit Hamas and hit them hard in those operations. And yet Hamas came back and came back and came back to the point where they were able to carry out October 7th, the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And now Israel is crushing them. I mean, crushing them. And Hamas's response, dig more terror tunnels. I mean, this tells you that if you leave them alive to fight another day, you'll have more October 7ths, God forbid, or at least attempts at more October 7ths. If anyone doubted, there you go. And yet we have the Biden administration saying to Israel, we do not agree with your invasion plan for Rafah. To the point where now an Israeli delegation led by Ron Dermer, the strategic affairs minister, Zaki Hanegbi, another member of Benjamin Netanyahu's war cabinet, have to schlep and travel to Washington, D.C. next week to meet with Biden administration officials and basically say, look, we're going into Rafah and this is why. And I guess try to get the blessing from the Biden administration. Israel's going to do it whether they have that blessing, quote unquote, from the Biden administration or not. But nonetheless, Israel's trying to smooth over tensions with its strongest ally, the United States. Good luck, because you're dealing with people in the Biden administration who clearly are preoccupied with the 2024 election. And I bring that up because clearly, whether it's Chuck Schumer, Biden's comments, Tony Blinken, clearly this administration, in my view, as an American living here in the midst of all this in election season, is catering to the far left wing of the Democrat Party, which is growing and which is very vocal and very influential, especially on social media. And it's very anti-Israel. So Biden is trying to curry favor with the far left of his base, as is Chuck Schumer. And folks are thinking of Michigan and these swing states. Michigan has a large Muslim population. Think of Dearborn. Very strong anti-Israel contingent there, to say the least. Biden wants those votes. Isn't that sad? That's what it boils down to. I can't think of any other explanation other than this is a political move on the part of the Biden administration, but also this is ideological. There are people in this administration who are not fond of Israel. Let's just say it. And it was the same way in the Obama administration in which Joe Biden served as vice president. You might say, well, don't get political. It is what it is, folks. I'm just laying out the facts, and you're not here to hear me mince words. This is my take on it. And it doesn't take a brain surgeon to see what's going on here. And as that hostility and those protests and those howls increase by the far left, again, increasingly growing and vocal and influential wing, especially on social media, as those howls, that chorus of howls, Hollywood, you saw the Academy Awards, that grows, that pressure on Israel and accountability of the Biden for the Biden administration. President Biden, you're supporting genocide. That's the kind of rhetoric we're hearing from the far left now. As that chatter grows, the Biden administration is going to look for ways to throw the far left a bone and make sure that their left flank is shored up in November 2024. That's not a crazy theory. That's pretty common sense if you're observing the American political scene right now. So that certainly plays into this, as does ideology and just a dislike in some quarters, a disdain, not only for the state of Israel, I'd say in particular for Benjamin Netanyahu, who's a right-wing politician. And this is a far left-wing administration here in the United States. But Bibi coming to the U.S. and speaking before Congress, wow. Talk about heads exploding. I'm just joking using that term, but you know what I mean. Talk about wailing and gnashing of teeth inside the Beltway among the left and among this administration. If Benjamin Netanyahu, the man who Joe Biden has publicly criticized, the man who Chuck Schumer just called basically to step aside, new elections, if he actually comes here and addresses the Congress. How many Democrats will boycott that speech, by the way, if Bibi comes and does it? In 2015, when I was there in the audience, several Democrats boycotted. And that's, what, 9 years ago? The Democrat Party has swung much further to the left in the past 9 years and much more against Israel, to the point where I'm concerned Israel is becoming a partisan issue here in the United States, ladies and gentlemen. It always been, look, Democrats, Republicans don't agree on much, but on Israel, look, we agree. You know, this is Israel's strongest ally in the Middle East, or I'm sorry, America's strongest ally. We share values. The list goes on. You're seeing that erode before your very eyes. Israel's becoming a partisan issue in that Republicans and the right are really now the only people who are vocally supporting Israel unabashedly. When you're hearing Biden administration officials say things in support of Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas, there's always a caveat. But Israel needs to observe international law. Israel, there are too many civilian casualties, and the pressure is always put on Israel, never on Hamas. Ever. Israel is held to unrealistic, impossible standards in the way it's conducting this war. I believe that this war will be studied by military strategists for years to come. Israel's great success in this war, not only in crushing Hamas in Gaza, one of the most inhospitable, cramped places on earth, but yes, in the fact that civilian casualties have been kept to a minimum. If you want, you can believe Hamas's casualty numbers, which may be inflated. Call me crazy. They're the official Gaza Health Ministry. That's Hamas. By the way, the loss of life on the IDF side has been much less than anyone expected. So this has been a smashing success for the IDF, this campaign in Gaza, no doubt. And tomorrow, quick programming note for you, tomorrow, Thursday, March 21st, Yair Pinto. We've got a lot of Yair fans here, and rightfully so. He heads up TBN Israel, great channel here on YouTube. My colleague in Jerusalem. Number one, subscribe to TBN Israel. Number two, Yair will be here tomorrow, and he'll be sharing from on the ground in Jerusalem his inside perspective. Look, Yair was on the ground in Khan Yunis, Gaza, just a few weeks ago, serving as an IDF spokesman. Yair's got the kind of information you need to know from on the ground in Israel. He'll be joining us talking about Shifa Hospital. What did the IDF uncover there? Number two, Hezbollah. How close is war with Lebanon? Number three, the Houthis in Yemen. Did you know that the Houthis actually connected yesterday? Yes, a Houthi ballistic missile fell in Israel near Eilat. It was not intercepted by Iron Dome. First time that's happened. And number four, Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, a new front that Iran is stirring up. Yair's got some inside details there as well. So join us here tomorrow for the Watchman Newscast. We'll post the video tomorrow, the interview with Yair. It is strong stuff. And by the way, the timing couldn't be better because, folks, a reminder, Monday, March 25th, we are launching Stakelbeck Tonight, my brand new show on TBN in which Yair Pinto will be a regular contributor. If you love Yair's channel and you love The Watchman, you'll love our brand new nightly show, Stakelbeck Tonight, airing every weeknight, Monday through Friday on TBN, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Great time slot, 7:30 Eastern. And then again, a second showing at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, twice a night, every night, Monday through Friday, starting this Monday, March 25th. And folks, we are working for launch week next week. And, you know, I say for such a time as this, we're going nightly with Stakelbeck Tonight. For such a time as this, in that, number one, Purim, commemorating the great victory over Haman in the Persian Empire, that is on Sunday. And Holy Week kicks off on Monday, culminating, obviously, Good Friday, Easter Sunday. I think it's God's timing for the show to launch during that week. Just a little fun fact for you. We were planning on launching on March 11th originally. Then it was bumped back. And at first, I didn't even realize March 25th, that's the beginning of Holy Week and Easter week. So God's timing for the launch of the show, no doubt. Join us. Mark your calendars. Monday, March 25th. Again, for launch week, we are working on some very special big name guests who you will absolutely recognize and you'll want to hear what they have to say. We can't wait to kick it off. I'm in our Dallas-Fort Worth brand new TBN studios right now. We call it the Plex, and it's an amazing facility. You're only seeing a little, this is right just on my laptop, the live stream. Folks, wait till you see the studio. It is amazing. I thank God for the opportunity to come to you every night now. Stakelbeck Tonight on TBN, prime time nationwide here in the United States. and beyond. Also, be on the lookout for our podcast. We just launched it, the Stackscast. And after I tell you about Stackscast, we're getting into Canada a little bit more and Justin Trudeau's government, their turn against Israel. But real quick, you can subscribe to our brand new podcast, the Stackscast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. This week, our special guest was Pastor Jack Hibbs, who's just a great guy, bold, who tells it like it is, and much more planned there. So the three legs, the Watchman here on YouTube, the Stackscast podcast, Apple, Spotify, all the podcast platforms, Stakelbeck tonight on TBN. We're a little bit busy, but I wouldn't have it any other way, folks. God, I'll take it because we're doing it for the kingdom. All of this programming is by God and for God. Honor God, and he will honor you. That's what our team lives by. We're going to keep at it in these prophetic Bible times in which we are living right now. Speaking of which, when I think of Bible prophecy, I think of promises, and God's a promise-keeping God. I think of warnings from the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I think of Genesis 12:3, in which God is very clear that he'll bless those who bless Israel. He'll curse those who curse Israel. We brought this up last week with South Africa, whose government, not the people of South Africa, but whose government has literally been cursing Israel. And I bring it up now in regards to Canada. Folks, I'm sad to say, my neighbor in the Great White North, I'm in the United States, our neighbor here in America to the Great White North, took a very nasty step in the wrong direction yesterday when it comes to Israel and its Israel policy. I want to quote a little bit of this, quote from this, I should say, directly. Canada has announced, if you're just joining us, we talked about this at the top a little bit. Canada has just announced that it will not export weapons to Israel anymore. And the minority, here's how it happened. Now, Justin Trudeau is a leftist, the Prime Minister of Canada, but he has an even more left-wing faction as part of his governing coalition. So listen to this. The minority left-leaning, they're leftists. The minority left-leaning New Democrats Party in Canada drafted the initial motion to stop all future arms exports to Israel. And the government embraced it. It embraced the measure. The government of Justin Trudeau embraced the measure of its minority partner. Wow. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Liberals Party, you can say that again, and the NDP continued negotiating until the last moment on language and changes. They had to add in calling for Hamas to disarm. Wow. In order to have that immediate ceasefire that Canada's government so badly wants, that had to be written in. It wasn't initially there. Hey, we're going to ban all exports to Israel. We demand a Palestinian state. Oh, yeah, maybe we should call on Hamas to disarm as well. Hamas, which is a vicious, bloodthirsty, demonic Nazi terrorist organization which attacked Israel. Maybe they should disarm too. Thanks, guys and gals. A key language change in the bill was not only initially it said we're going to ban all military goods and technology to Israel. What does that mean? Now it's just arms exports. And the Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly, confirmed yesterday that the government would end future sales of weapons to Israel. She told reporters it is a real thing. Real proud about that, I guess. After the cabinet voted in support of the resolution, she called the changes significant and not merely symbolic. So they're crowing about this. They're proud of it. And she warned that while the weapons ban will serve as policy, well, this could be good. We'll see how far in practice it's actually carried out, because already Canada has, Canadian companies, I presume, has some arms deals lined up with Israel. Are those contracts canceled? And by the way, Israel's response, Israel, his name is Israel, Israel's foreign minister, Israel Katz, wrote that history will judge Canada harshly over this decision, and I agree. He said it's regrettable. I could use stronger words than that, but he's a diplomat. It's regrettable that the Canadian government is taking a step that undermines Israel's right to self-defense against Hamas terrorists who have committed terrible crimes against humanity and against innocent civilians, men, women, children, the elderly. Israel will continue to fight until Hamas is destroyed and all hostages are returned home. Thank you, Foreign Minister Israel Katz. The West isn't getting the memo, though. And look for more pressure, ladies and gentlemen, to be applied by the likes of Justin Trudeau's government, by the likes of the Biden administration. If you think it's bad right now, as Israel prepares to go into Rafah, the last bastion, the last stronghold of Hamas support, the Biden administration has come out and said, we don't support it. And by the way, Israel, again, I don't mean to be a broken record, but in this case, I will be. Israel is a sovereign nation that can handle its own affairs. It doesn't need a permission slip from the Biden administration or anyone else if it wants to go into Rafah in the wake of October 7th. Call me crazy. The Biden administration is acting like it has veto power over all of Israel's military operations. That's why I was so disturbed when Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, actually sat in on Israeli war cabinet meetings a few months ago. What's he doing there? No. Listen, I don't expect Israeli cabinet members and government officials to sit in on U.S. war cabinet deliberations, nor should they. And by the nor should British, French. There should be Americans in that war room. And by the same token, there should be Israelis in their war room, deciding on how they, as a sovereign nation, want to conduct a war with Hamas terrorists in Gaza. The U.S. didn't ask for Israel's approval after 9/11. The U.S. didn't ask for the world's approval after Pearl Harbor, nor should Israel have to ask for anyone else's approval after October 7th. But look for that pressure to increase, no doubt. And if you think it's bad now, as Israel prepares, and Netanyahu reiterated today, we're going into Rafah. It may not be right away, but we're going in. Now, I wonder how much of that is tactical. I wonder how much is maybe element of surprise. And I wonder and worry that some of that delay in going into Rafah is due to Western pressure, in particular from the Biden administration. This visit next week by that Israeli delegation to D.C. should be very, very interesting, folks. But if you think it's bad now, wait till Bibi speaks before Congress. If that happens, he might say no. He may say, you know what, it's too tense right now. If I speak before Congress, it'll really make things even more tense. He might say that, or he might say, you know what, I got to deliver a message to my friends. This administration is not a friend, but there are many, many members of Congress who are. I'll speak directly to them and the American people. That was the thinking in 2015 as the Iran deal went down and Bibi spoke here. But folks, when things heat up in Lebanon, and that's if, it's not if, but when Israel fights a war against Lebanon or against Hezbollah, and by extension against Lebanon, because Hezbollah has ruled southern Lebanon with an iron fist under the noses of the Lebanese government and the Lebanese military. When that happens, and that war will dwarf the Gaza war, Western diplomats and the quote-unquote international community led by the EU, the Biden administration, the UN, they're really going to have some troubles and worries then. And you're not going to be able to restrain Israel, nor should you restrain Israel from crushing Hezbollah as well. Folks, tumultuous times in the world's most tumultuous region. Keep it all in prayer. Prayer works. I've seen that as we prep to launch this show on March 25th. God has driven that home for me and our team time and time again over the past few weeks. We're making major decisions here, folks, launching major projects, major ventures. They cost money. There's a lot involved. I moved to Dallas-Fort Worth to launch all of this, and God led me here. I'm glad I did. But these are big decisions, and you can't make any of these decisions without putting it before the Lord in prayer. Every last decision. Thy will be done, Lord, not mine. What do you want, God? I trust and I'm going to obey. And that's the way it's got to be. And I said earlier, honor God and he will honor you. That's how it's got to be. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and then he will make your path straight. Proverbs 3:5. I try to live my life by it. Good advice for anyone right now. Hey, also for Israel's leaders to follow that advice, to have the wisdom of Solomon and spines of steel. Prayer works. Keep it up. Until tomorrow and our report with Yair Pinto from TBN Israel. Look for it here tomorrow. God bless you. Thanks for joining us. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below.